Hi, I'm Lynn Langett. Welcome to part 3 in my multi-part screencast series using Google's Cloud for Developers. In today's screencast, I'm going to take a look at figuring out how much it costs to use the Google Cloud. So this is a bit about me if this is the first one of these that you're listening to. The most important point probably for this one is that I am a Google Cloud Developer Expert as recognized by Google for my community education work, and I've been so for 2 years now. This series has multiple parts, and the parts that I've recorded already are an introduction to the cloud, a conceptual introduction to the services that are available, and getting started using the web consoles or the graphical interfaces to just spin up services. Today I'm going to be explaining billing, and then subsequently I'll be showing you command line tools for starting and stopping and managing services on the Google Cloud. And then I'll also be doing a screencast on introduction to programming their APIs with Java and finishing up with a learning more. All the code samples that are relevant to the series will be up on my GitHub repository. And again, I'm focusing on Java, even though you can program in various languages because that's what I happen to use. So it's very challenging as a cloud and big data architect to stay on top of not only the service offerings from all the various cloud vendors, Microsoft, Amazon, Rackspace, so on and so forth, and Google, but even more challenging is to get accurate cost estimates from a particular vendor and then to go across vendors and to do price comparisons. It's almost like it's deliberately confusing between the vendors. Now, to that end, I've also done a screencast on understanding Amazon pricing, and I'll overlay a link to that on this slide here in case you're interested, because here I'll be focusing on Google pricing. I probably should do one for Azure as well, because again, I've spent countless hours trying to figure out these vendors' offerings, and I want to share that with you. I mentioned this on a previous Google Cloud screencast, but I'm going to bring it up again. A lot of you are probably just getting started, and it's important to understand what options you have to get started without, costing you a lot of money. So unlike Amazon, Google doesn't really have a clearly stated free tier, although they do have, as I'm going to show you, a courtesy limit on a lot of their services. But in addition to that, last year in 2013, they were offering this offer to give you $2,000 worth of credit if you signed up. And right now I checked and it was not open, but I'm just sort of assuming they're going to open it again in 2014, which I don't know because I don't work for Google, but it's worth a try to go to this URL, cloud.google.com, WAC Resources, WAC Starter Pack, and sign up on the waiting list or the interest list because, it's handy to have some credit if you're getting started. So there's a whole bunch of resources and places in Google's sites to get pricing information, and I'm going to go into basically demo for the rest of the screencast just to show you and kind of navigate you around because it's a little tricky to find these places. So I have some of the key URLs here, and I'll be showing you those in just a second. So if you go to the main site, you can look for pricing, and then depending on which services you're going to use, you want to look at what are the free tiers for maybe the subsets of services. And App Engine in particular, there's a pretty detailed quota page that explains to you what are the courtesy limits per subservice. And then there's a pricing calculator which you can use and have the results mailed to you. So I'll show you that, and what's on the screenshot here is a portion of the estimate that I had emailed for a little sample that I did. Within the developer consoles, there is a billing section, and again, I'll be showing you that. We'll be starting there. Now, you might remember that one of the compelling reasons to use the Google Cloud is because it auto scales. Now, that might also scare you, saying, well, what kind of bill am I going to get? Well, it's very well implemented in that you put spending limits, and I'll show you what that looks like. So you can see how that works. So scaling to a limit, basically. And then I'll also show you about monitoring usage via the service dashboards. And I'll mention that there are APIs as well. Now, we're not programming in this one, but I'll probably swing back around in the screencast where I show APIs and show you a little bit about the APIs for billing, because you could create your own application to monitor. So that being said, let's go over to the Google resources, and I will take some time to navigate you through them and help you to figure out the world of pricing. So here we are in the developers console, and you might remember from the previous screencast that I made a new project and did not enable billing. So let me just navigate down. And you might remember that a project is a container for one or more sets of services. Also, you might note that there's an all up charges section right here. And whenever you have a question, obviously you can just click on this and you can see this is for the month. Okay. So I'm going to go into screencast, and I'll remind you I have not enabled billing here. So if I wanted to use certain services, for example, BigQuery, and you might remember that you enable the services here, so you set them on and off, then what I can do is I would just go to the BigQuery console as I showed you on the last screencast and work with it. Now if I go into the API itself and I click on Quotas, this takes us back to the old console, and again, you might remember this from the last screencast. There used to be separate consoles for separate services, but Google is in the process of consolidating, so you're kind of going to be skipping back and forth. That's why they look a little bit different. So you can see for this particular project, I hadn't enabled billing, and so here's the courtesy limit, and this is per service. So you can see that I have 10,000 requests per day, and if I want to, and billing is not enabled, and I can only use courtesy limits. So it's pretty clearly stated once you find that place. And then this takes it over into the documentation where you can look at the pricing and see how the pricing works for the particular service. So again, for the compute engine, I have 20 requests per second per user, 50,000 requests per day. I didn't turn on App Engine in this project. And here I can set per user limits, and then I can associate this, per user basically. Now, if I wanted to turn this from a test basically into production, then I would, obviously need to enable billing. So I would do that here through billing, and that takes us back to the new console. It's a little bit tricky. And again, a little clunky right now. You literally, to enable billing in the new console, and I showed you this yesterday's screencast, but you set up billing, and you set up your profile. Now again, I'm not going to put my credit card in during the screencast, so I'll just show you a project where I have set up billing already. So here I've set up billing, and you can see I have a transaction history, which I can set a date range for, and I can make a payment through here. I have a billing profile, and I have billing contacts. So again, this is very similar to, it reminds me of how Azure is set up actually. Who pays? I blanked out a lot of the information here because it's my personal information. Who are the administrators? And here you can do a billing export. And you can see because I have multiple projects set up for billing, they're all consolidated here under the billing section of the console. Now, as I mentioned in the slides, understanding quotas helps you to understand what's free tier, and particularly around App Engine. Basically, I really recommend that you read this if you're going to try it out. So you can see that there's all these resources that are associated with App Engine. We saw this when we talked about what services are available. And, it's one of the reasons you use App Engine, because it has logging, and it has task queues, and it has data stores, and all kinds of things that you're going to want to use in your project. So you can see that you have safety quotas, and that's basically to protect, as it says, the integrity of App Engine. That's Google sets that. And then billable resource quotas, and this is what we're talking about here. Every application gets an amount of each billable resource for free, but administrators can increase the billable quota by enabling paid apps. And here it tells you very specifically. So this would be the Amazon equivalent to free tier if you're, if you've used that. So obviously Blob Store, 5 gigs, free. And just to show you what that looks like, here I am in a project, and I've got my quota page open here under quota details, and the project has been dormant, so there's not any activity going on, but you can see what this looks like in the console in terms of the quotas. And you can see here's the various requests, storage, search, mail, so on and so forth. And it basically is going to show you at the level of all these various services where you're at in terms of your quota for the 24-hour period. Next, let's take a look at the Google Cloud Pricing Calculator. But the project name, it's pretty self-explanatory, and I already filled it out, but I'll just kind of go down and show it to you. It's at cloud.google.com, whack products, whack calculator. And first they give you Google Compute Engine, so the number of servers, the cores, up to 16. This helps you understand the offering too. The RAM, the data center, how much usage you have here, persistent disk sizes. And again, if you don't know what some of these things are, you can just click on them, right? And then it gives you a link to the pricing. So it's pretty well done. Google Cloud Storage. Okay. Again, what's a Class A operation? I don't know. What's a Class B? Go over there and learn more and read the docs. Network bandwidth, egress. Notice there's no charges for ingress, which is common. Google Cloud SQL. So this is your MySQL. These are your core services here. Now notice what's not here is App Engine. Yeah, App Engine is not here. So you can see I just did a testing server, I did a development servers, persistent disk, just threw some numbers in there, Cloud SQL, 100 gig Cloud SQL, cloud storage 100 gigs, and came up with $1,200, and then you can email it. So it's not the do all and end all. You're going to have to still probably use a manual spreadsheet, but at least if you're dealing with Compute Engine and some of the data stores, you have something. And here is what it looks like. So in addition to using Google Calculator and reading the Google documentation and making my own spreadsheet all the time, I have stumbled upon these third-party pricing calculators. Now you might remember yesterday I showed you RightScale, which is a third-party management solution for infrastructure as a service across multiple clouds, and they do templates so that you can manage through their console rather than the individual vendors' consoles. So another service that they have is a free cross-vendor pricing calculator. Now their pricing calculator focuses on a very narrow slice of each vendor, specifically virtual machines or infrastructure as a service, or in the case of Google Compute Engine. So I have found it to be useful though, and I'm going to go ahead and demo it because it just gives you a sense of what the vendors have available, what size machines, and what kind of base hourly cost. Now you're going to want to check this because RightScale, good for them. They're doing their best to try to, take all this vendor information, which gets constantly updated, and usually the prices go down because of competition, and keep it accurate on their site. So I would use this as a beginning guideline, and then I would go back to the vendor site and I would double check to make sure that RightScale had got all the information. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. So this is at planforcloud.rightscale.com whack deployments. So here I am at planforcloud.rightscale.com whack deployments, and I do have a sample one here, and I could see a 3-year cost report, and I'll add another one here in just a minute so you can see. And you can see that you have cost breakdowns because you can associate some data storage, obviously, transfer if you go across zones. I think it is in Google. I'm not sure if I'm getting the terminology right, but from Europe to US, if you transfer across, it's going to cost you. And then here it shows your various costs. Now notice they have change purchase option, reserved or on demand, and of course that's not available in Google. That's an Amazon thing. One piece of feedback that I've been giving the cloud teams is Amazon's pricing is very nuanced, and it gives the customers a lot of options, and I'd really like to see some of the other vendors aggressively meet them on their on-demand and their reserved and their spot and all that good stuff. So that's a definite ask to not only Google but the Azure team, because it's going to help them to be more competitive. Let me go and add a server, And let's say that I just want to look at, I don't want to consider these other two guys, and I don't want to consider Azure, let's say, for this. And so now I just say I have CPU count and RAM. So let's say I want to have 8 CPUs and I want to have at least 4 gigs of RAM. I really don't need 32, and I just need that. So that gives me these choices, which unfortunately takes Google out of the running here. Now let's say if I want to have less RAM. Now I have a couple offerings from Google, and you can see that the pricing is pretty similar, which is great for us as consumers. But again, I caution you to double check it. And then if you wanted to select it, you just select. And then, you know, you have your operating system, which of course in Google is Linux. The cloud is Google US or Google Europe, because the Europe charges might change, and Amazon is, you know, obviously has different charges, particularly for different zones. Purchase option is on demand, because that's all we have, and the usage is 24 hours per day. So, or some lesser amount. So let's say that we did, you know, 9 to 5, and then we would add the server, and that would add it to our deployment. Now, in addition to this, we can add storage. So if we wanted to add storage, that's going to allow us to compare storage. So again, let's just take a storage comparison here, and let's see what we got in terms of AWS with EBS, EBS to S3, we have Glacier, we have blob stores in Azure, and we have cloud storage. Again, if nothing else, this will help you to understand the different offers that are available. So, you know, we have Snapshot, for example, in Google Compute Engine. We have image storage. Let's take this one off. Let's say that we want to have snapshot storage. And you can see the quantity, the size, the reads, and the requests. So if I wanted to have, for example, cloud storage, Google US, and then I could have durable, reduced availability. It's a lower cost. It has the same durability as Google Cloud Standard. Let's say I want that. And quantity 1, storage in gigs. I'm going to have 10 gigs. Read requests per month. I'm going to leave it at 0 because I don't know. And add storage. And then I have my storage. So then the next one is databases. And you're kind of seeing how this works, but it's kind of cool to play with, I think. I don't know, I guess I'm too much of a nerd here. So add database. And again, now this time let's take off Amazon and let's take off these guys and see what we've got. And let's put a CPU count up to 4 and RAM up to 2. And we have Cloud SQL D4 instances for Google and D8 instances, and then we have some things from Rackspace as well. And see if we select this. I don't know, I find this to be useful. So I know I'm taking a bit of time on it, but I find it to be useful, and hopefully you will too. So now I have my database, then I have data transfer, support plans, which I didn't mention that, I don't think, previously. So it is important to know that Google does have support plans. Bronze is free, and then they have silver and gold and platinum, which, you know, can be very, very important when you're moving to production. And then other costs, I guess these are just third-party services. So yeah, and so then when you're done, see the 3-year cost report. All right, so this was a short one today. Tomorrow it will be a little bit longer because I'll be getting into using the command line tools, including the brand spanking new GC Cloud that was just released. So we're going to be taking a look at GC Cloud, GC Util, and some of the other command line tools in working with the services available in the Google Cloud. So I always have to make my little pitch for teaching the next generation how to program and use the cloud, and hopefully some of my resources can help. But we need more people, like people listening in, to help teach our kids. So jump over to teachingkidsprogramming.org, which is my nonprofit, and grab some of our courseware and go and start teaching. We're going to start next week, actually, at a local school here. We're going to be going every week on Fridays, working with a teacher who was a history teacher who took our class last year and got so inspired and learned to program, and he's now going to be teaching with us. So it really can happen, and if we all sort of did that, then we'd have our kids learning programming. So hopefully I can inspire you to teach some kids to program. So if you've been listening in, you know me by now. If you want to learn more about Google Cloud and all things data, RSS my blog, or subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm going to try to put out lots of videos in 2014. It's one of my resolutions, and so far I'm doing good. And if you want to follow on with some of this Google Cloud stuff, last year I recorded a more complete series for Pluralsight, which is a vendor that has technical videos, and I suggest that you check it out. The bulk of what I recorded last year is still valid, although Google's updated their services. The core of it is still very much the same, and you might find some value out of that or some of the other courses at Pluralsight. Anyway, have a fantastic day, and for All Things Data, this is Lynn Langit.